What is up, everybody? In this video, I want to talk about factors that affect quarterback record. I'm going to be doing a 3-part series on this. In this video, I'll be breaking down quarterback record on a career level. In the next 2 parts, I'm going to show how quarterback record is affected on a season-by-season level and then on a game-by-game level. I created this channel to talk Detroit sports, but I felt that this is a topic that needed to be discussed. Quarterbacks generally get all of the praise when things go right and all of the blame when things go wrong. I wanted to start this series because I'm hoping that I can give a little bit of a different perspective on this so-called stat. On this screen, I have the career winning percentages of 14 current NFL quarterbacks. Please note that if the name is in bold, then I threw out one of their seasons for various reasons. I threw out Joe Flacco's record from 2018. I threw out Alex Smith's first season in the NFL, and I threw out Matthew Stafford's first 2 seasons, so I hope that clears that up. Tom Brady has the best winning percentage and Marcus Mariota has the worst winning percentage of these quarterbacks that I decided to use. So far it looks right. But if the number one thing you judge a quarterback by is record, then that means that Dak Prescott is a better quarterback than Aaron Rodgers and Andrew Luck. That sounds really odd, doesn't it? And it gets even better. If quarterback record is the number one thing you judge a quarterback by, then Joe Flacco and Alex Smith are better quarterbacks than Drew Brees, Matt Ryan, Phillip Rivers, and Matthew Stafford. Does that not sound really strange? Reach in and ask yourself, is Alex Smith really a better quarterback than Drew Brees or Matt Ryan? Well, if you're using quarterback record as your indicator, then apparently they are. I think that's absolutely absurd to believe that Alex Smith and Dak Prescott are better quarterbacks than Drew Brees, Matt Ryan, Phillip Rivers, or Matthew Stafford, but there are actually people that would take Dak Prescott because he has the better winning percentage. One thing that I think gets overlooked in this whole discussion about quarterback record is that if quarterback A has a better record than quarterback B, then quarterback A's production should be higher. So now that I've shown you the winning percentages, let's actually talk about the production. In this slide, I adjusted each of these quarterbacks per game stats to fit a full season. Ben Roethlisberger, on average, doesn't have the same kind of production that Aaron Rodgers has, but he has a better record. Prescott's production is getting blown out of the water by Brees, Ryan, Rivers, Rodgers, Luck, and Stafford, but they have worse winning percentages. So we can clearly see that there's quarterbacks that are producing at a high level yet have worse quarterback records than quarterbacks not producing at a high level. This is a Detroit sports channel primarily, so don't be surprised if I point out Matthew Stafford a bunch throughout this video. And I'm going to be talking about Matthew Stafford's production really fast because he is the odd man out in this group of quarterbacks. His production is certainly at least comparable to Roethlisberger's, Rodgers, and Luck's, but unlike them, he has a career winning percentage under 500. A lot of outsiders would have me believe that he's just a stat patter, which is not true, and we will be getting to all of that in this video. So we can see that it is very possible for inferior quarterbacks to have better winning percentages. But why is that? It's because there's extra context around these records that must be taken into account. Why do clearly superior quarterbacks like Matt Ryan and Matt Stafford have a worse winning percentage than Joe Flacco? That is because there are extra factors that need to be taken into consideration, and we're going to be going over some of them right now. These are the 4 factors that I'm going to be going over in order from what I view as the most important to least important that affects a quarterback's record. The truly most important factor, in my opinion, is coaching and coordinators, but I don't have it listed because I'm going to be more talking about how the players surrounding a quarterback make a difference than how the coaches do. But don't make any mistake about it. Coaching matters. And one thing I do want to say about coaching really fast is that I've seen Bill Belichick say that it is impossible for good players to overcome bad coaching. And I would have to agree with him. The head coach needs to make sure that all the coordinators and players are on the same page. The head coach does probably have the toughest job because he needs to make sure that everything is correct in order for the players to succeed. So we haven't even gotten to the other factors that I want to talk about, and people like Stafford are already at a disadvantage. Pretty much every quarterback I'm referencing in this video has had much better head coaches and offensive coordinators than Stafford. So please keep that in mind as we keep getting through. But aside from coaching, the most important factor, in my opinion, that needs to be taken into consideration when talking about quarterback record is the quarterback's defense. If the offense ever struggles, then the defense needs to be able to pick up the slack. You'll find out that people like Drew Brees and Matt Stafford have not been afforded the luxury of having a bad game since they probably weren't going to get bailed out by their defense at all. But they are both very human. They can have bad games. And also, what difference does it make if you score 32 points but your defense gives up 35? The second most important factor, in my opinion, is the play of the quarterback's offensive line. The offensive line needs to not only be able to pass protect, they need to be able to open up holes for the running backs. And if the offensive line can hold up, it also helps give the receivers more time to get open. So your offensive line matters. And that leads me to my third most important point, which is that a quarterback needs to have a good running game. It gets overlooked, but it is important. It makes it easier for the receivers to get open. It makes a quarterback's offense hard to defend. I can almost guarantee you that every defensive coordinator in the NFL loves playing against one-dimensional offenses because they are just so easy to defend against. You know what's coming. And the fourth most important factor, aside from coaching, is having good targets. So don't get me wrong, all of these factors are important, and the way I have these factors ranked doesn't tell the whole way I feel because I think they are all important. And I only view the most important factor as barely more important than the least important factor that I'm going to be going over. I will say this really fast about having good targets. If you don't have a good running game, then you better have good targets to throw to, or the quarterback is in trouble. But now with all that explained, let's see how other aspects of these quarterbacks' teams have performed throughout their careers, starting on the defensive side of the ball. Here's on average where each of these quarterbacks' scoring defenses have ranked. Their average scoring defense per drive and how many defensive Pro Bowlers and first-team All-Pros that each of these quarterbacks have had. And please keep in mind, throughout this video, I only counted a quarterback's Pro Bowlers or first-team All-Pros if they made a Pro Bowl or first-team All-Pro while playing with said quarterback. For example, Snacks Harrison was a first-team All-Pro with the Giants, but he hasn't even played a full season with the Lions yet, so he hasn't gotten a chance to make a first-team All-Pro or Pro Bowl while playing with Stafford, really. But anyways, 4 of the 5 quarterbacks with the best winning percentages had top 10 scoring defenses on average. Prescott's defense might deserve an asterisk next to it because his scoring defenses per drive have surprisingly not ranked the highest. Does that mean Prescott carried the team? Well, there's more factors than defense that we will be going over. Let's go back to Matthew Stafford for a second. So far, he's been at a disadvantage with his coaching and with his defenses. While his average scoring defense has ranked 17th throughout his career, his defenses on average have ranked 20th in points given up per drive, and that only ranked behind Drew Brees and Matt Ryan. And even if you just go by overall scoring defense, then the only quarterbacks who have had worse defenses on average are Brees, Manning, and Luck. Now, I do want to take a second to point out that what Aaron Rodgers and Andrew Luck have done is amazing. They haven't really been given the proper defensive help, yet they continue to win. But don't make any mistake. Aaron Rodgers in particular probably had help in other ways, as you will eventually see. Even when you look at what Brees has done with his porous defenses, it's impressive. Do you really think it's a coincidence that the quarterbacks with the best winning percentages have had consistently good defensive support? Do you now see why quarterbacks like Joe Flacco and Alex Smith have better winning percentages than Drew Brees, Matt Ryan, Phillip Rivers, and Matthew Stafford? It's not because they're better, it's because they had the better supporting cast, specifically on the defensive side of the ball. And we haven't even gotten to the other aspects of the team yet. Do you really think that it's a coincidence that the further down your list you go, the worse the scoring defenses generally get? There's exceptions, but for the most part, some of these inferior quarterbacks were getting more help than the superior quarterbacks. So this is just part of the reason why quarterbacks like Alex Smith can have better winning percentages. Let's see how these quarterbacks' offensive lines have played throughout their careers now. Here's how many times per game each quarterback was getting sacked, how many yards the average rush attempt generated, and how many Pro Bowl offensive linemen each quarterback has played with in their careers. Let me point out Matthew Stafford again. he has now been at a disadvantage in 2 of the factors that we've looked at. You can argue that he's getting sacked a lot because he's holding on to the ball too long, but if you want to say that, then why is it that out of every quarterback on this slide, his offensive line generated the lowest yards per rush attempt? Stafford is tied for 3rd among these quarterbacks in getting sacked the most, but his offensive line wasn't just getting him sacked, it wasn't helping out the running backs either. And of the quarterbacks on this slide, he is tied with Andrew Luck with having the fewest Pro Bowl offensive linemen with just 1 in his career. Now, Joe Flacco and Alex Smith have had better defensive support on average than Breeze, Ryan Rivers, and Stafford, but they also appear to have had slightly worse offensive lines than those guys except for Stafford. Alex Smith's offensive line is interesting, though, because he was getting sacked a lot, but his offensive line was generating the 3rd most yards per rush attempt of the quarterbacks I'm referencing. So it's hard to judge Alex Smith's offensive line because it's just odd for an offensive line to be able to contribute to such a high yards per rush attempt yet struggle so much in pass protection. I want to now note Tom Brady's offensive line. Tom Brady in his career has been at a great advantage compared to the other quarterbacks. On average, he had a top 10 scoring defense, and he's also had a really good offensive line too. His offensive line wasn't necessarily generating the best yards per rush attempt, but he's been sacked the 2nd fewest times at 1.8, which is tied with Matt Ryan and Eli Manning. Brady has also played with the 2nd most Pro Bowl and first-team All-Pro offensive linemen with 6, along with Roethlisberger and Rodgers. Now, I do want to note that part of the reason that Brady gets sacked so little might have to do with the fact that a player of his caliber probably knows what the defense is trying to do to him better than even the defense knows. But do you viewers really think it's a coincidence that the quarterback so far that has the best winning percentage also has had the best supporting cast? Or better yet, do you think it's a coincidence that the quarterback with the worst supporting cast so far, like Stafford, has the 2nd lowest winning percentage of these quarterbacks that I'm using, only ahead of Marcus Mariota? Now, 2 quarterbacks that have had interesting lines, like Alex Smith, are Russell Wilson and Aaron Rodgers. Their offensive lines have given up a lot of sacks, but they were generating 4.3 and 4.56 yards per carry, which are top 5 on this list. What that might tell me is that some of those sacks just might be the quarterback's fault. I understand that pass blocking and run blocking aren't the same, but it just does not make any sense for an offensive line to be so good at run blocking yet so bad at pass protection. I mean, Russell Wilson has had some bad O-lines. They've both had bad O-lines at times. But generally speaking, the better a quarterback's offensive line is, the more success they will have when it comes to winning. Before we move on, we can see that the quarterbacks that have had the best defensive support on average have had the best winning percentages. There surprisingly wasn't that much of a correlation between getting sacked and having a worse record, surprisingly. But that's why I had defense as the number 1 thing that affected a quarterback's record. So let's talk about the running game now. Let's start off with talking about Matthew Stafford again, because we are now 3 factors in, and he's been at a disadvantage in all 3 of them compared to the other more winning quarterbacks. Stafford has had the worst running game on average in his career of these quarterbacks by 3 spots. On average, his running games have ranked 26th throughout his career. So again, that's 3 categories in which the team around him was bottom 5 in of the quarterbacks that I decided to reference in this video. Now let's talk about the 5 winningest quarterbacks. 4 of them had running games that ranked in the top half of the league. The only quarterback that didn't have a running game that ranked in the top half of the league on average was Aaron Rodgers. But what I'm hoping that you viewers have noticed so far is that the winningest quarterbacks have had good supporting casts. Brady's and Roethlisberger's running games weren't wowing anybody, but they've had balance. Brady and Roethlisberger in particular have almost never had holes on their teams. Even Russell Wilson hasn't really had any holes on his teams so far. Maybe with his offensive lines, but still, it's incredible. I hope you all are seeing that supporting cast matters, and it helps contribute to quarterbacks winning. But their defenses have been generally good, and their offensive lines have generally been good too. The running games haven't been off the charts, but they've definitely been adequate. Roethlisberger's running games on average have barely ranked in the top half of the league, but look at how many 1,000-yard rushers he's had. Even if his running games didn't rank the highest, he has more often than not had a running back that the defense actually had to game plan for. Then you look at guys like Stafford, who has basically played his entire career with holes all over his teams, and especially in the running game. So let's just compare Stafford's supporting cast to Joe Flacco's. Flacco doesn't have a better winning percentage than Stafford because he's just more of a winner. He has a better winning percentage because he's had way more help than Stafford. Flacco in his career has had by far the better defensive support. He had a better offensive line, and he has had a better running game. Quarterbacks like Flacco, Smith, and Prescott have had more support around them than Stafford in all three categories that we've looked at so far. And let's even compare Stafford's supporting cast to the guys with the 6 best winning percentages. Aaron Rodgers and Andrew Luck so far haven't had the most amazing supporting cast surrounding them, but I would have to think that it definitely blows Stafford's supporting cast out of the water. But do you all see at least a little bit right now how quarterbacks like Alex Smith and Joe Flacco can finish with better records than Drew Brees, Matt Ryan, Phillip Rivers, and Matthew Stafford in particular? It's not because they're better. It's because they had the better supporting cast. Here's how many Pro Bowl receivers and tight ends each of these 14 quarterbacks have played with in their careers. And guess who is yet again at a disadvantage? Matthew Stafford. Stafford did have Calvin Johnson, and he did have Golden Tate, but outside of that, every quarterback that I decided to use, except for Joe Flacco, Russell Wilson, and Marcus Mariota, have played with more Pro Bowl receivers and tight ends. Obviously, the amount of Pro Bowlers at receiver and tight end a quarterback has played with doesn't always mean that the quarterback has had bad targets. But still, it is amazing that Matthew Stafford has been at a disadvantage to almost every quarterback in this slide. And he's been at a disadvantage with just about every quarterback in every slide we've looked at. So outside of Stafford, let's break this down a little bit. One thing that really surprised me was that Joe Flacco never played with a Pro Bowl receiver or tight end. Maybe he could have been much more productive if he was given such a receiver, but I surprisingly could not find a receiver that made the Pro Bowl while playing with Flacco. I want to talk about Aaron Rodgers because I hope this section shows how Aaron Rodgers has been able to carry his teams. He's had the second most Pro Bowl receivers with 4, which is tied with Brady, Ryan, and Manning. Aaron Rodgers' offensive lines have been underrated. Have there been instances of him having bad offensive lines? Of course there have been, but he has played with 6 different Pro Bowl offensive linemen. Along with that, he's played with 4 Pro Bowl receivers, and the only one who has yet to prove that they can be productive without Rodgers is Randall Cobb. Rodgers' defenses on average barely cracked the top 16, but he's had very loaded offenses throughout his career. Drew Brees has had loaded offenses in his career, but the problem is that there have been times where his offenses were as good as his defenses were bad. And that's the same case with Matt Ryan. That is why quarterbacks like Flacco and Smith are able to have better winning percentages than them. It's amazing how well the Patriots and Steelers have been run. Roethlisberger and Brady have almost never played with holes on their team. We've gotten this far, and it's become extremely clear that the 3 winningest quarterbacks didn't just have good defenses, offensive lines, and running games. They had very solid targets as well. That includes Russell Wilson. He's only played with 2 Pro Bowl receivers or tight ends, but you'd have to think that that number is going to go up as he gets more into his career. So if there's anything I want you to take away from watching this, it's that supporting cast matters. Do Russell Wilson, Tom Brady, Ben Roethlisberger, Dak Prescott deserve credit for having such high winning percentages? They absolutely deserve credit. But the players around them deserve a lot of credit for helping those quarterbacks get those high winning percentages. Does Matthew Stafford deserve blame for having such a low winning percentage? Only kind of. But the unbelievably bad supporting cast around him unquestionably deserves blame too. Do you all truly believe that if Stafford had, say, Russell Wilson's supporting cast throughout his career, that his winning percentage would be so low? No, it wouldn't. And do you think Wilson's winning percentage would be so high if he had Stafford's supporting cast throughout his career? It most certainly would not. And do you believe that Joe Flacco and Alex Smith would have high winning percentages if they had Matthew Stafford or Matt Ryan's supporting cast throughout their careers? No, they would not. There's actually evidence that suggests if you give Ryan and Stafford, Flacco's, and Smith's supporting casts, they would do more with it. So, quarterbacks do not deserve all the credit when things go right, and they do not deserve all the blame when things go wrong. There's way too many things that factor into a quarterback's record. I probably didn't even get to all of them. There's still special teams that I didn't even discuss in this video. And I didn't even discuss coaching all that much in this video. But just because Dak Prescott has a better winning percentage than Drew Brees and Matt Ryan does not mean he's more of a winner or better. It means he's had the better supporting cast. Of the 14 quarterbacks that I decided to use, Matthew Stafford has unquestionably had the worst supporting cast around him. There's very small areas in which he had the better help. But when it's all added together, it's amazing how little help he's gotten from his defenses, offensive lines, and running games in particular. He had Calvin Johnson and Ndamukong Suh, but it's hard to say that ever equated to him having good help around him. That's why he has the second worst winning percentage of these 14 quarterbacks. It's not because he's bad, it's because he's had no help. Even when you just look at Brady and Roethlisberger, they have unquestionably had the best support system around them throughout their careers. They almost have never played with holes on their roster. That is why they have such high winning percentages. And like I said, they deserve lots of credit for having such high winning percentages. But the players around them deserve at least as much credit. So I hope you all realize that you need help to win. Just because the quarterback is good does not mean you can ignore the other factors that affect a football team. And I hope you realize that quarterbacks who win have good supporting casts. That will be all for this video. I hope you enjoyed. As I mentioned at the beginning, I will be doing 2 more parts on this. In the next video, I will be breaking down how quarterback record is affected on a season level. And I'll be using the same factors that I used in this video. But just on a more microscopic scale, I guess, if you know what I mean. In that video, I hope to help you football lovers be able to identify the quarterbacks that do more with less and the quarterbacks who achieve exactly the way the team is supposed to achieve. Thank you all for watching. As I said at the beginning, this is a Detroit sports channel, normally. And if you love Detroit sports, then you would be wise to go check out all of the links in the description because you will love every single one of them. Thank you again for watching. Stay tuned for the second part.